Hey, welcome back to IMPAKT TV. With me here is Hannah Toticki. She's a visual artist, graduated from the Royal Danish Academy in Copenhagen, and her work works with sculpture, but also furniture and fashion, looking at how technologies, digital devices, apparatus, if you want to call them that way, influence our interactions and the way we behave and the way we understand each other. Thank you so much for joining us here in the studio.
Thank you for having me.
For being here in Utrecht. I was really happy to see your work today for the first time in the physical space, in the exhibition. Really interesting to really get closer to it and to see it closer up. And the first thing that I would like to ask you is, if I look at your work that in different ways physically obstructs us from dealing with our devices by either making sure we can't look at our phone because the glasses are in the way, or making sure we have to kind of stop scrolling.
Yeah.
Would you say we have to disconnect first before we can reconnect to ourselves or to other people?
No, I don't think I would say that. I mean, I think what we need is like a critical gaze to what's the tech industry and what the digital devices do to our lives. But at the same time, I totally recognize that there is a big potential and a big emancipatory potential about the whole online world, and also about the devices we have. But they've been introduced into our lives both in a very rapid way, I think, and also in a way where it overtakes some of those social functions and relations that we were actually able to have a social life even before we had smartphones. And I think we need to put a critical look at what does it do to our abilities to being social creatures. You were mentioning the touch screen protection rings, the rings that you put on your index finger and thumb, and it kind of blocks your ability to use touch screens. And that one, I think, is mostly about focus and about the ability of being present in a room, because and it comes from a personal experience that I'm like, I'm super distracted by my phone, and I feel that in many social contexts, all of us are distracted by our phones. Is it actually more interesting what is happening in the pocket right now than what is going on right here? So I wanted to use that symbol of the ring, which is also like connecting to the theme of modern love. It's also like the wedding ring and the way you kind of, it has a very heavy symbol to it. That
it makes a promise, right? In a way.
It makes a promise.
Yeah,
and for
absolutely.
me, the touchscreen protection rings were a way of saying, I'm here with you, I'm not anywhere else right now. And that is actually quite a big thing these days, to put your phone away and to be with someone. That's like a gesture in itself. But it's also a restraint, so it's not. There's a doubleness to it for me, because it's also an annoying restraint, and important stuff takes place online, definitely. So it's not. I don't want to. I'm not pointing fingers at anyone. I'm not saying that we should quit digital devices. I'm married to someone I met on Tinder, so I'm also born of my generation, you know. But I'm responding to a problem that I experience in my everyday life with attention and with being together in a room.
Would you say that your look on that work has changed over the course of the pandemic, where not for everybody, of course, but a lot of people did have their loved ones at distance, so by definition mediated by screens and technologies?
Yes and no. I mean, it definitely accentuated that, but I think already before the pandemic it was clear that there's a very big potential. Also think about the climate change, that you can be present somewhere without actually having to travel. So obviously it has a very big potential, and during the pandemic this became even more obvious, and it also permitted someone who would otherwise not have been able to be in contact, which is beautiful, which is a really beautiful thing. But but at the same time, I think actually the most important thing I learned was how important it is to be in the same physical space, because that mediated reality can't do it all for us. We can. It's not the same thing. Basically, we need to be able to touch each other and hug each other and be present in the same room. That is a different thing. So that the pandemic also made that very clear for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot of different senses, right? Like on a basic level that are missing, but then also on a lot of ways of being able to read someone's face or their body language, or like all this indirect kind of language and communication that we have to communicate as humans, basically.
Yeah,
that falls away if you're just giving a like or a message, or even on a video call. That's never really the same.
It isn't.
Yeah, absolutely. And would you say, so another work that you present here is a pair of glasses where that basically blocks your eyes.
Yeah.
And you can't wear them in the exhibition, but you can see them on show. And I can imagine them blocking your eyes from looking at your phone, as we always kind of look down, but you can still look straight, right?
Yeah,
like you can still engage with your, let's say, regular environment.
Yeah, they're blocking that very small piece of your sight where the phone usually is. And I think for me it was also interesting how it's such a small part of your bodily senses, like the very small parts of your fingers and this small square in your gaze that actually contains this whole online world. But to put that restraint on those very small parts of our body, our gaze, that's restraining so much more. So now I forgot the question, but anyways, they're super annoying to wear. You start to stand like this, and you like change your bodily behavior. It's definitely an obstacle that wants to draw attention to the fact that we take out the phone of our pockets maybe a few times more than it's actually needed.
I think it's also such a phenomenon that we see in cities. Like, I mean, I do that myself, so I'm as guilty of that as anybody else. But I would walk through the city looking at my phone and trying to send a text message and hoping not to run into a pool or whatever. But I
totally do that, and it's a response to that. It's also, I mean, I'm very much in a conversation with my own problems here.
Yeah, exactly, because I think it is something that, I mean, at least everybody who engages with their phones deals with, right? Like I can see my parents maybe never even charging their phone and turning it off most of the time. Yeah, they don't have these issues. But then anybody else kind of deals with that, because you also do want to stay in touch. And you don't want to log out. And you don't want to be offline if you know you can be connected for whatever that connection might mean.
Yeah, and that's one thing. That one thing is what it does to our attention, but the other thing which I find more scary is this whole surveillance potential that it holds, and the fact that a very few companies and a very few algorithms decides what we use a lot of our attention for, and that forms us as humans. It forms our political insights and our the way we hang out socially, and that's maybe also where I want to go with my work. That I want us to, as a collective, using these digital devices. Have more of a critical gaze towards what does it actually do to us, and so much of what is both the data that is collected, but also the algorithm that is deciding what you're seeing. It's hidden. So even if I think I'm looking at Instagram and I think I'm looking at the world happening out there, someone, or actually not someone, but some algorithm designed that world for me based on what that algorithm thinks I would make me spend more time inside that universe. And I definitely think we need a very critical gaze on that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very much an attention economy, right? You know that your attention is being monetized, but then at the same time you still feel like engaging and kind of forgetting that whenever you're interacting, although most people I think are aware of the fact that that's what's happening.
And I don't remember the exact numbers, but there are like studies of how our attention span has actually shrinked with the use of these digital devices. So I think also our ability to think critically is attacked from multiple sides when engaging with these new tools that we have.
And would you say we're addicted? Would you say that's... Because I think that there's a lot of these elements close to addiction, right? If I see the sun hitting my phone in a certain way, that it kind of looks like there's a notification, and it does make me kind of jump off my chair already. Although that's silly, but that's the first impulse that my body gives me, that I think I have a message. Yeah. Even it's the sun hitting my phone. Like there's all these addictive qualities, I think, to how we interact.
I think that's a more accurate term, that it's addictive qualities. I mean, some people have a real digital addiction, and that can be a very real problem. And maybe we're also speaking in a very big we right now, because as you were also mentioning, there is a gap between generations here, and people obviously use their smart devices in very different ways. But I think a lot of us can recognize this feeling of the phone actually being like an extension of your body, and if you don't have it on you, it's uncomfortable. And if you forget it at home, it's like I can only speak for myself, obviously, but I can feel it all the time. I'm like, okay, should I walk out? Should I walk all the way down to the shop without my phone? Okay, I'm really going to do this.
It feels naked somehow, although that's ridiculous in a way, but at the same time, there's a certain feeling of being on the street naked, not
or you left your hand at home or something.
Exactly, it's like, something's wrong.
Yeah. So I'm just reflecting on the fact that when it becomes so much a part of your body, it also forms the way we interact and the way we are with ourselves. And that I think we need to be very critical towards.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I was wondering about the work that's right now presented at Centraal Museum called Framing Presence, where you sit down and you see the other person in this screen that feels a lot like you're in a Zoom call again, like you're back in the sometimes called the Zoom prison, because it can feel that way. Could you tell me something about that work?
Yeah, it's fun. It was actually created before the pandemic, just a few months before, but it's one of those works that kind of the meaning shifts with the times and the presence it's in. So for me, it's both about it's like, for those who haven't seen it, it's like it's a chair for two person facing each other. There's a screen, it's semi-transparent, and then there's a cutout at the size of a screen, so you will see exactly that same frame as if you were in a Zoom call. And I want to draw the attention exactly to the difference between being physically together and being in a Zoom call. If I sit in front of you in the sculpture, I will see that frame of you, and for me it's a reflection of how much closer, even if I don't see your full body, even if this is a very direct reference to the screen, how much closer I feel to that other person sitting in front of them, even if there's something like between our bodies and it's just that frame. So it's actually a matter of drawing attention to how much closer I feel, but it's also, I think, it's also challenging to sit in front of each other and look at each other when you're in the physical space together. So there is also a discomfort in it and a doubleness to it. Like in many of my costumes and works, there is this unheimlichness. There is it's not just a relief. For example, the focus wear, which is like also two garments that would hold your body in position to actually focus right at the other person in front of you. It doesn't look comfortable at all. So it's also playing with this discomfort that we can sometimes feel when we actually then have to be present. And this is more of like something I often wonder about, whether the digital realm made it more difficult for us. I'm not really old enough to actually know from a personal experience, but whether it made it whether it has made it more discomfortable to sit right next to each other and like have a face-to-face conversation. And
I think it's also this discomfort that we need to be critical, right? Like if we always feel comfortable, then we don't, people don't feel this need to be critical because everything feels nice and it feels natural and smooth. But then when we feel this discomfort and suddenly we think, but where is that coming from? And why do I feel so restrained? Even though it's something that actually should be okay to leave, like to not be able to interact with, right?
Yeah.
It should be okay, but somehow it makes us uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I think we're running out of time, but thank you so much, Hannah, for this conversation. It was lovely talking to you, and thanks again for coming over to Utrecht.
Thank you.
And I'm sure we'll continue this conversation later on at the bar.
Definitely. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.